Good morning and welcome back to our course on the C programming language. So in today's session we are going to discuss about the types of functions. Very simple topic. Let us start our discussion with again the function. Function is very important, right? The definition of the function is it is the set of statements that can perform a specific task. Right. This and all we have seen from the last sessions. But our present topic of interest is the types of functions that are supported in C. Basically in C programming language, two types of functions are supported. The first type we call it as the library functions. These library functions are also called as predefined functions. This is the first category we have. And the second category of functions that is supported in the C programming language is the user-defined functions. So by looking at the names, you can simply identify what are these functions. The first category is the predefined functions. So you can say that these functions are already defined. Pre means before. They are defined before. They are defined by somebody else. So the definitions are written by somebody else, and those already defined functions are placed inside some common place. Whatever definitions we write, those definitions and the declarations, not the definitions and the declarations are present in a common place. They will put everything in a common place. That common place we call it as the library. So to define the predefined functions or the library functions, we can say like this. These are the functions which are declared inside the C header files. Or else you can also define like this. These are the functions which are already defined by somebody else and they are placed in a common place, which we call it as the library. So whatever functions we declare inside the libraries or the header files, those are called as the predefined functions. For example, we have seen the predefined functions like printf function, standard output function. Similarly, the standard input function is scanf. Like that, some mathematical functions like what we can say power function, or else we can say that seal function, or you can also give the mathematical function as floor. Similarly, get s function, put s function, put string. Similarly, string handling functions like string concatenation, strcat, string copy, strcpy. These are all the various examples of predefined functions. And coming to the user-defined functions, the name itself is clearly saying that these are the functions defined by the user. Who is the user? He is nothing but the programmer. So when the programmer defines his own instructions to perform some particular task, those types of functions are called as the user-defined functions. So to define these user-defined functions, we can say like this. These are the functions which are created by the C programmer. These are the functions which are defined by the user. These are the functions that are declared, that are created by the programmers. So this is called the user defined function. So why we are going for this user defined functions? What happens if you don't have this user defined functions means there are only few functionalities that are supported by the predefined functions, like printf, scanf, power, seal, floor, putS, getS, string copy, string concatenation. So the programmers, they cannot think of all the functionalities, what can happen in the future, what functions can be used in the future. They cannot visualize it and they cannot write all the code inside different functions. So C programming supports the provision for defining the programmer specific code. That programmer specific code is called as the user defined functions, right? So it is used to reduce the complexity of larger programs. So why it is used means to reduce the complexity of large programs, right? So that is all about the types of functions we have. Basically C supports only two types of functions: library functions, otherwise it is called as predefined functions. So these library functions are the built-in functions. We can also call it as built-in functions, another term. Built-in functions already defined by somebody else. Those are the built-in functions in C which are placed at a common place. As I told that it is called as, the common place is called as the library. And these predefined functions or the built-in functions are used to perform only specific operations like standard input, standard output, power, finding the power, finding the square root, finding the string copy. All these functionalities, only specific functionalities are explained by, are given by these built-in functions. So as I told that for printf, this is a library function used to print something onto the output screen. And similarly, there are many library functions, right? There are many standard functions that are available, and as we know that all these library functions are the predefined functions. They are stored in various header files. What is the extension of header file? .h. For example, if you take the standard input and output functions, printf and scanf, they are stored inside stdio.h header file. Like that, if you take these mathematical functions, they are stored under a header file called math.h. And these string handling functions, they are stored under string.h header file. Like that, to handle different functions like mathematics and the strings, we have different header files, right, which has an extension of .h. And we know that in order to make use of these built-in functions, you have to include these header files. Without including the header files, you cannot make use of these standard built-in functions. So one way you can use these standard built-in functions is you have to include the header file. As I told that we have different header files like stdio.h, which stands for the standard input output header file. Similarly, there is another header file like conio.h, which stands for console input output header file. String.h. Let me take this. So this is one thing. Conio is another one, and another one is string.h, which is used to deal with the string related functions. Similarly, there is another header file which is called as stdlib. This one is called as standard library header file. This header file contains all the library functions which are used for dynamic memory management. Very important concept in C. dynamic memory management. We'll see this topic in the next coming sessions. So for implementing the dynamic memory management functions, we require memory management concept. We require some standard functions like malloc, calloc, free, realloc. All these four predefined functions should be used to make use of or to implement the concept of dynamic memory management. And all these standard functions malloc, calloc, realloc, free, these four functions are defined inside the standard library.h. So when you are making use of dynamic memory management, you should make it mandatory that you always include this stdlib.h. Otherwise these functions will not work. Similarly, as I told that there is another function or the header file which is called as math.h, which consists of various mathematical operations which are defined in terms of functions like square root, power, etc. Similarly, there are a lot of different header files. These are the important things we will make use of in our programming. String.h, stdio.h, math.h, conio.h, stdlib.h. Similarly, there are other things like ctype.h, something like that, time.h, which are not useful for the basic learner. So whatever I told here, that stdio.h, math.h, conio, stdlib and string.h, these are sufficient for becoming a good programmer in C. Advanced programming in C requires the different header files like time.h, ctype.h, all these things. So that's all for today's session. In this session we have seen the various types of functions. We started our discussion with the definition of the function, and then we have seen the two types of functions that are supported in C programming language, like the built-in functions, which are otherwise called as library functions. The other name for the library functions are predefined functions. We have seen a lot of example functions which are predefined, and we have seen various header files under which we can see these predefined functions. Other than this, we have this user defined functions where the user is free to code his or her own logic depending upon the problem complexity. So these are the uses of the user defined functions, right? And the last, before wrapping up our today's topic, the last one is one simple question. Main, we know the importance of main function. This is very important function where the execution always starts with main. You cannot write a single program without main. All these terms are already stored in our memory, right? But my question is, this main is a function. Now question is whether it is predefined function or user defined function. So people may think that the main is a very important function where the execution always starts with main. People are in a wrong assumption that it is a predefined function, but this is not a predefined function. Main is a user defined function. The reason is very simple. Let me take an example, right, of addition of two integer values. The same example, hash include stdio.h main int a is equal to 10, int b is equal to 20, and printf result is equal to percentile d a plus b, right? How many statements are there in the main? I have 3 statements, 1, 2 and 3. And who has written these 3 statements? Int a is equal to 10. This is written by me, that means the user. And int b is equal to 20. This is written by me, that is programmer or user. And the third statement is also written by me. So who is defining, who is writing all these 3 statements? And whatever may be, how many number of statements you want to write inside the main, all the statements will be written by the user or the programmer. So since the user is defining the statements, or since the user is defining the main function is treated as the user defined function. So very important question. Whether the main is a predefined function or a user defined function. Undoubtedly the main is a user defined function. So that's all for today's session. Thank you one and all for joining the session.